بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Now in this video I want to talk about why has there been a rise in extremism in the Muslim world, right? Now let me give you an example of uniformity, why uniformity is important in order for a society to be stable, right? Now let me give you an example. Let's take anything controversial, right? Let's say the constitution. Let's take the constitution of a country and hand it to 1,000 people, right? So if you let them study the constitution and discuss with each other and come up with an interpretation, the interpretation is gonna have a wide variety of spectrum, right? Based on how they understand, how they, their own backgrounds. There can be a lot of things, their own biases, right? So why am I taking the example of a constitution is because, constitution, just like religion, tells us how do we lead our life, although in a much in a much different way. But that's why constitutional interpretations are also very controversial, right? But the point is that if you give 1,000 people the constitution, you're gonna get a wide variety of interpretations. And if you let them discuss with each other, the people who are more outspoken are gonna develop a bigger gathering, right? Like the extroverts, right? And the outspoken extroverts. The introverts are gonna obviously be alone, and they're gonna have a much less gathering. But the point is that you're gonna end up with a group that is made up of subgroups, and those groups are likely going to have interpretations, and some of them might be intense or extreme about their interpretation, and you'll eventually end up with an unstable setup, right? And so this is what happens when you have non-uniformity and you let people interpret. If you open interpretation of controversial topics or documents. So this is what has happened to the Muslim world. The Muslim world, if you look at the history, have been following 4 schools of thoughts in the fiqh, right? And the schools of thought, the jurisprudence that was developed in the early 2 or 3 centuries, and there were the 4 major imams that we followed. And amongst those 4 major imams, we have the Hanafi, Imam Hanifa's school of thought, and Imam Malik's school of thought, rahimahumullah. Their schools of thought were the most dominant ones that were followed, right? Now, in the recent times, we have a new way of looking at things, right? That you don't have to follow anyone, right? Just self-interpretation is the way to go. Although it's still like not the majority of the ummah, but a large amount of the people of Muslims now follow this approach, that they want to self-interpret. Now, going back to the constitution example, right? If you send those 1,000 people to a lawyer, right, who's skilled in his or her profession, then the outcome is going to be very different. You might get small groups, but most of the people are going to follow the expert. And this is why we have to follow experts, and we, experts bring, or standard approaches bring uniformity in a society. So this very reason, this is one of the reasons. Obviously there are political reasons also, which I'm not going to go into in this video, but this is one of the major reasons why there is non-uniformity amongst the Muslims. And let me give you another example. Uthman radiallahu anh, he disposed of quite a few manuscripts in the early century, in the beginning of Islam, because of the differences that were developing. A lot of the Qaris, they were becoming aggressive in refuting other people who were reciting the Quran in a different way. So Uthman radiallahu anh, he's also called Jami' al-Quran, because uh, he combined the Quran in a single manuscript. And so he did that. He disposed of other manuscripts that were causing disparity between the different parties, and uh, he improved uniformity in the ummah. And so uniformity is very important. So in the recent years, there has been a lot of non-uniformity, and that has led to a rise in extremism. So what happens is, when you have these disparate groups, right? These different groups arguing with each other. The ones that are outspoken, they develop bigger gatherings, bigger groups, and they become aggressive because of because they think they're right and everyone is wrong. And that leads to something, excommunication rises, right? And this is why excommunication has been there has been a rise in excommunication amongst the Muslims. Like there are groups now that say anything that the Sufis are kafirs, the Shias are kafirs, and so the takfir that has led to a rise in takfir amongst the Muslims. So again, that goes back to non-uniformity. That non-uniformity has increased extremism. And as a result of that, right? So what happens when non-uniformity increases? Extremism rises as a result of that. And in the next phase, what happens, because the extremist groups, they're very extreme in their views, obviously, they tend to be very strict. That strictness obviously breeds a generation that become frustrated, especially in these times, because of the rise of secular values, and the secular nations are more powerful now, and their culture is the dominant one. Obviously, it's more attractive to the generations that have spent their time living with extremist interpretations and strict interpretations. And this is what we're seeing in a lot of Arab countries, where the young generation are tired and frustrated with religion, so they're abandoning religion. And I was talking to one of our friends. I don't have any stats to confirm this, but this is my personal observation, that the people who are from more extremist, like their previous generations were more strict and extremist, not like Daesh, but they were very strict in their interpretation and imposing their religion. Their next generations are very rebellious. They don't want to follow the religion. Whenever you talk about religion, they panic. They get a panic attack, not in the real sense, but they feel discomfort, right? Because of which because they think religion is too strict, right? And this is why the Sufi interpretation is a softer interpretation, which is becoming more attractive. Obviously, a big chunk of people still say that they're takfir, they do takfir on the Sufis. But if they do takfir, obviously then Imam Ghazali, ma'adallah, was also kafir, and then Salahuddin Ayyubi, rahimahullah, they were kafirs, right? If you say Sufis are kafirs, right? Which I was also called, right, once. So what happens is, there is going to be as a result of this, a rise in atheism and a rise in the Sufi interpretation of Islam, right? Because the Sufis, I'm talking about the Sufis who follow the Sunnah strictly, right? And you can get more details in my other videos about how do the Sufis look towards religion, and I'll talk more about that. I still have to make more videos on that. But the conclusion of this video is that extremism leads to abandoning of religion, right? First leads to, obviously, non-uniformity leads to extremism, and extremism leads to coming generations abandoning their religion, which is happening, which is the phenomena we're observing right now. So this is why we have to go to a softer interpretation of Islam, which our Salaf actually follow. So inshallah, in the next videos I'll talk more about this topic. But another thing I want to say is that we should seriously consider the Sufi interpretation of Islam, because that is a more accommodating and more soft interpretation, and that is the interpretation that our scholars are used to follow. In the last century, we have abandoned that, and that has risen. That has led to a rise in extremism and non-uniformity, and then extremism, and now abandoning of religion. Jazakallah for watching. Assalamu alaikum.